go. Window. Okay. Okay, so you all should be able to hopefully see something that says Gateway Community College right now. All that good stuff. We're good. Thank you, Deborah. That's helpful. And I'm going to. Cool.
Hello.
Will you mute yourself, Olga?
Oh.
Thank you. I couldn't mute you. Okay, everybody. All right. First, let's talk about what a herniated disc is. It's a term that's thrown around a lot. And I find that people say things like, I've herniated a disc, I've slipped a disc, I've blown a disc, I've ruptured a disc. And all of those terms, in my mind, essentially mean the same thing. Essentially mean the same thing. It means that a disc is somehow, part of the disc, by the way, is somehow pressing out from where it should be and it's hitting a nerve. So there are different technical terms, like discs are the padding between your vertebrae, and you've got about 24 vertebrae. I say about because some people have an extra one. You've got about 24 vertebrae here, and you've got cartilaginous padding between every single vertebrae. It's very hard cartilage, and it's meant to protect the impact of your body as you bounce along in life. Sometimes over time, as we get older, that padding actually dries out a little bit and degenerates a little bit, and your vertebrae get closer together, and that can cause some problems because that too can create pinching on nerves in there. But what we're really talking about today is bulging disc or herniated disc. And that's in the picture here, and that's when the disc is bulging out. And what happens when it bulges out, I've got a great little thing here. If you can also see my presentation, but I hope you can see me too. Good. Thank you. This is a model of two discs, two vertebrae. Vertebrae here. The disc is in the middle. It's the thing that provides shock absorption. And this is your spinal cord going down through your vertebrae. A lot of people don't know, but your spinal cord is actually completely protected within your vertebrae. It's actually going down through a hole through your vertebrae. So when somebody's massaging your back, just the act of massaging it, they can't hit your spinal cord. Now, they might bother you because it's real sensitive back there and they're moving you around and things like that, but they can't actually hurt your spinal cord, even if you've got a herniated disc or whatever. That doesn't mean they can't set things off. So, when too much pressure is applied here, you can actually get a bulging. Is it going to bulge for me? Yes, it'll bulge here. You can actually get a bulging of the disc coming out. Do you see that? And what it's usually doing, is hitting on what we call a nerve plexi. This nerve coming out the side of your vertebral column. It's squishing out and hitting that nerve, just like in the picture. Super, super painful. Because this trunk, if you want to think about your nervous system in very simple terms, but pretty accurate terms, your nervous system is the telephone wires that come from your brain, down your spine, and branch out to every single area of your body. And we don't think about it a lot, but I essentially have to have a wire to every single spot on my finger that tells me that I'm touching my finger right now. Otherwise, I would not have any sensation in this area. And so there are tiny wires that go to every single spot in my body that eventually go back to bigger and bigger groupings of wire, eventually back to my spine, and eventually up to my head. So these nerve plexes that come off the side of your vertebral column are highly sensitive. They've got lots of nerves in them. And when they get pinched, it's quite painful. And that is either a herniated disc or a bulging disc, or what people call a slipped disc. There's no such thing as a slipped disc. Your disc doesn't slide out of there. It's glued in place. But it feels like it's slipped. It's pushing forward. And so they might call it a slipped disc or a ruptured disc. All these things are the same. And the reason I'm not making a huge distinction in them is because it's something in the disc that's pinching on you. I don't care whether it's gone to the whole point of being herniated, which means it's ruptured out, or if it's just bulging out a little bit, it's pinching you, and that's the problem. Now, that's the problem. The type of symptoms it can give you vary. Because it's pinching on a telephone wire, it can often give you symptoms far away from that spot. You might have pain in your back, in fact usually you do, but you also might have numbness in your foot, in your leg, shooting pain in your leg, shooting pain in your foot. Also, these nerves feed your intestines and your bladder. And so a lot of people, when they have really bad lower back pain and really bad pinched discs, will tell you that they almost feel like they lack bowel control. And they do, because those nerves are being pinched. So I'm telling you this to empathize with you if you're one of these people. Because when you injure your back that badly, it really feels like you always have to go to the bathroom. You feel like, oh, I almost have to be careful. My leg's also hurting and numb. My back is killing me. It's really tight. And of course you get the zinging pains, which are delightful. Which is when you walk around all of a sudden, and it just comes on you all at once. And so you tend to be pretty depressed when this is going on and pretty paranoid that you're going to set off your back. And this is all from this disc bulging out. So why does it happen? So it can happen from a variety of reasons, right? It can happen for all sorts of reasons, but it's extremely common in our culture. And we think that is because of two things that unfortunately are very common to being American, and I display them both wonderfully, so I will use myself as an example. One thing is I'm overweight, and unfortunately just being overweight puts extra pressure on your discs, which means there's more likelihood over time that they will bulge out. It's a simple fact of life. It's hard. We live in a food-rich society and the stuff is delicious. And so reducing your weight is just less to carry around, and it's not about carrying around for a day, it's about carrying around for 40 years, right? It adds up over time. And if you have hurt your back, losing weight really helps. Fact of life. That's number one. But here's the second one that's actually very interesting. We all do a lot of this. And what I'm doing right now is I'm sitting down. And sitting is fine, but sitting 8 hours a day is not great for you. It causes all sorts of problems. We could have a whole other presentation about that because it causes problems in your venous return and your legs, all that kind of stuff, but I'm not talking about that today. What it causes when it comes to low back problems is a shortening in what we call your hip flexors. And I do not want to give you a whole anatomy lesson today because I think it'll bore you. But let's just take one simple hip flexor. There's a lot of them here. You've got something called your iliopsoas, which is really two muscles that essentially go like this on your body. They essentially hook to your low back from the inside and your hips and down to your leg. And when they contract, they allow you to bend over. That's great. But when I sit for a long period of time, and I don't mean for a day, I mean 8 hours a day for 20 years, this muscle can shorten. And when this muscle shortens, this leg doesn't want to go all the way back down again when I get up. Now it's got to go down because I've got to stand up. So what happens is, and I'm highly exaggerating this, but I get up from a seated position and I kind of stay seated. My legs are straight, but this muscle in my tummy to my legs is short. So I actually am like this. Now, you won't see it this exaggerated in people. What you'll see is a very tiny kind of thing here. I really should be standing like this, but I'm standing like this. And over a long period of time, that puts a lot of pressure on my back because weight is such, if you've ever tried to hold up a book, I can hold it up like this all day long. The minute I put it out here, it becomes very heavy, especially over time. So this little thing of sitting for a long period of time and getting up and never getting straight again creates some problems. And now my head's also forward and I've got all this kind of weight there. And all this puts a lot of strain on your back. And these sorts of things, we believe, the extra weight I'm carrying, the fact that I sit for a long time, the fact that I can't get into good posture again, start to lead to disc problems. So, by the way, very simply, whether you've injured your back or not, get up every hour and walk around. Get up every hour and walk around. But we will talk about some corrective stretches to fix that, because that's what we need to get to next. Okay? All right. So, let's do that. I like to kind of look at healing your back once it's been injured in a two-phase process. So, I'm assuming if you're here, you have injured your back before. I'm assuming that you know what it's like when you start to heal it. It is not a beautiful, nice, progressive line like this. It gets better one day. You seem to kind of re-injure it doing stuff. It gets better. It kind of re-injures one day. And if you're lucky, it's a jagged line up. And some days you're like, I don't even know if I'm making any progress. And hopefully you notice this. If you do nothing and rest it all the time, it gets worse. And if you exercise it a lot, it gets worse. It is one of the most confounding problems to have. And that is part of the key to rehabbing a back. It does not do well with anything for any extended period of time, including sleep. Most injuries I'd be like, go to bed, sleep, stay there, sleep, stay there, sleep. Not a back injury. I also would not say don't go to bed with a back injury. That's not good too. You have to rest it. But one of the keys that we tell people when they are trying to heal an injured back is don't do anything longer than 4 hours. Sometimes really it's don't do anything longer than an hour or two. Don't stand longer than an hour. Don't sit longer than an hour. Try not to sleep more than 4 hours at a time. And I don't mean you don't get a good night's sleep, but if you have a bad back, you're waking up every 2 hours anyway. We want you to get up out of bed and walk around for a little bit. I don't mean hike around. I'm talking about walk around the house. Do a lap, come back to bed. Backs do not do well with doing anything for a long period of time, even rest. They just don't. What they need is very gentle stimulation and very gentle rest. Very gentle stimulation, very gentle rest. And so it's one of the hardest things, but we recommend that you literally don't stay in bed 8 hours straight. You get up. So nothing for more than 4 hour periods of time. I'd really argue a lot of stuff no longer than an hour, right? And we understand all those transitions are difficult, right? Getting up when you have a hurt back hurts, and sitting back down hurts, and laying down hurts, and getting up hurts, but you need to do those transitions. This is phase one, the beginning. It's bad. So you rest and move, rest and move, rest and move. We also recommend walking in itself. And I know I just said to get up and walk, but I meant walking is the #1 rehab for an injured back. It gives just the right amount of stress to your body. When you walk, your hips actually wiggle side to side and move front and back. And we need that to happen. Because backs and healing backs is really more about your hips. All of these beautiful dominoes that are stacked on top of each other rest on your hips. And if your hips are off, your whole back gets messed up. And when you walk, all the little muscles that you use in your hip get exercised in just the right manner to help to align your hips and start to build up core strength. So walking is the #1 back rehab exercise. It's the #1 thing they do. And that's what you would start doing after you were doing little bits of sleep, little bits of rest. If it started to feel better, you'd start to walk. Now this whole time, as you all know, you've got to watch it. Because what happens, you walk too far one day and you're like, oh man, I really kind of did it in yesterday. When that happens, you back off a little bit. This requires you to be highly sensitive to your body, and you'll mess up over and over again. We all will. That's just how it is. But to adjust to your exercise level. But you're trying to increase your walking. It's one of the best things you can do. Also, it's kind of helping you with the weight thing and all sorts of other things. So the last thing you want to be doing is gaining weight during this period. Okay? And the walking's helping us with this weird pelvic tilt that we've developed and stuff. So it's helping rehab all that stuff down there. The third thing is, and I know that you hear this from everybody, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I know all that stuff, reduce stress. We really don't know a disease that's not stress related anymore. We just don't. We don't know a disease out there that's not made worse by stress or wasn't created by stress or something. And if you think about it in a weird way, your back problem was created by stress. You were probably eating too much because you were stressed. You were probably working and sitting too long because you were stressed. You weren't working and sitting too long because you're having fun. You were working and sitting too long because you were stressed. and you were working away. And so it was a lifestyle thing, and it was a stress-related lifestyle thing. So reducing stress in your life, and I don't just say that, by the way, as like a just reduce stress. I don't think that's very useful advice. I would maybe say this instead. Start picking yourself first over all the other stuff on your list. I honestly think if back problems are meant to teach us a lesson, that's the lesson they're meant to teach us, is that you need to start coming first. And I find it, especially at a place like Gateway, where I have found that people are truly, genuinely kind-hearted and are here 99% of the time for the right reasons. They have a very hard time putting themselves first. But you got to take care of yourself first. Okay, so that's phase one. Let's say walking's going well, getting up in the middle of the night's going fairly well. This thing's kind of bothering you, but it's going on the upswing. It's not going on the downswing. We can start to add in exercises. And I want to be very clear about the exercises you do, because people make one really big mistake during this time. Your back's tight. In fact, let me take this off this just in case. I'm going to stop presenting for just a second. Just in case it's making it harder to see me. My back is tight. It's hurt. One of the most correct, one of the things your body tries to do when you are hurt is splint you. It tenses up on purpose to keep me from moving this thing. And that's smart. But that means my back muscles are tight. And it would make sense that I would want to stretch them. This would make sense. This is what feels tight. This is what I want to stretch. And the pain's back here. I almost kind of want to get away from it. Here's the problem. This is my back. This is how my spine looks. When I bend over like this, I am more likely to be pushing the disc out this way. I am stretching out these muscles here, but I'm actually recreating the thing that probably herniated my disc in the first place, was my spine popping out of alignment here and bending over this way. So I'm not saying don't ever bend over, but I'm saying that's not the cure. These are the herniations that hurt you. If you have a bulging disc coming out the front, there's no nerve back here. It's inside your body. You might have them. We don't know because they don't bother people. What bothers people is the ones that hit their nerves. And that comes from bending forward. What we'd like to do is somehow bend back carefully to encourage this disc to shove back in. So we really want to be doing back bending exercises, but it's really tricky when you're injured. So the first thing we have to do is decompress this. And we're going to do that. Let me present here. I'll show you. It's going to be quite obvious, but let me put this back on here. Here we go. We are going to decompress. And we want to do some type of hanging exercise. And we are literally doing a hanging exercise to pull these vertebrae apart before we do any of the other exercises. You have to do this one first. Order actually matters on these. Because I don't want to have my discs compressed and then bend back. It's going to really hurt. I need to decompress them first and then bend back. So you've got to decompress here. And here's the really tricky part. The first time you do this, this is all the exercise you're going to do. And when you're hanging there like in a doorway, you don't have to even have your whole body weight hanging. You can hang in a doorway and you'll just kind of hold yourself and you'll feel your back separate. And it'll feel good. Don't let go all at once. Because what will happen when you let go all at once is your vertebrae will come crashing back together and you'll get a sharp shooting pain and it'll drop to your knees. It's terrible. So when you're hanging, you also let go very slow. All of you with back pain know this, right? You know if you do anything quick, you're doomed. Well, the hanging's really great. It decompresses you. It actually helps kind of suck up a bulging disc. Traction can help. It's traction, but you can't let the traction go all at once. You have to let it go really slowly. Just like when you get out of bed, you gotta let your feet slowly hit the ground because you're starting to compress again. All right, but here, exercise number one, super important. decompress the discs before we try to bend anywhere, because we're making room for bending. That's super important. If decompressing goes well, let's say you do that for a day or two and you're like, this feels pretty good. I think it's helping. I'm not getting any worse, because your body has to get used to this too, just like the walking. Then the next thing we go to is a cobra pose. Cobra pose. This is where you are laying on your stomach and you are pushing yourself up. And we are doing it because we actually, instead of bending forward, want to be bending back. We want to be bending back. It actually helps to push the disc back away from the nerve. It helps to push the disc back away from the nerve. And this, with the suspension first, decompression, and then a cobra pose second, are two of the most healing exercises you can do for herniated disc. Now, when you get better at the half cobra pose, and by the way, better, I just meant it feels comfortable, right? When it starts feeling good. And you'll want to come out of this one slowly too. Like after you're done kind of back bending, lay yourself back flat, rest there a little bit, then slowly get up. You can try to even go full. Full is important for two reasons. Two really, really important reasons. I said we got into this problem. I'll stop sharing again here. I said we got into this problem because we had short hip flexors. Well, if our lovely skeleton here, if the hips got short from bending over this way, going back this way actually lengthens these hip flexors. So when you do a full cobra, you're hoping your hips drop into the table, into the floor. Actually, I've got a table here. If I can swing this here, I'll show you guys with me. Let's see. Let's find out if we can do this. Bear with me. It's yoga with tap, Scott. Okay. So, the idea on this one, once I'm used to it, is that I'm up high enough that my hips are not touching the table. By the way, we would not bounce like this. I'm just trying to show you my hips aren't touching the table. I don't want them to. I want to be bending enough that my hips are coming forward because I'm trying to stretch out these muscles that are short this way. I'm trying to do the opposite movement. I actually want my butt, my hips to go into the table. So I'm lifting myself up and letting gravity do that. So now I'm doing the back bend that was so helpful in repositioning that disc, but I'm also lengthening out my iliopsoas and rectus femoris and all sorts of other lovely hip flexor muscles to help change my pelvic alignment. The idea is that my pelvis will not be doing this so much. I'm actually loosening this stuff up so my pelvis comes in, and look what happens to my back. I've got a nice stable back now. And my belly is more centered too, because when I'm down like this, I'm carrying all this weight here. Boom. So, I decompress, I eventually do a full cobra stretch, and I would recommend you do those things for the rest of your life. They feel good, and they're super important, and once you get comfortable with that, you can start doing things like front bends. But just remember, front bends aren't helping you, and quite often they are hurting you. Being loose overall helps you, so that's why I'm not, if you can do them and tolerate them, that's fine. But they're not the thing that's actually helping your back problem. Strangely enough, bending back into your back problem in general helps. The reason I said in general is because I don't know what your back problem is. I can tell you it helped with about 95% of the people that I've worked with, and this is a very common recommendation. But you might have a herniation in a way, or it may not be a herniation. It could be another problem where this stuff doesn't help, and if you feel it's making it worse, that's a good time to go share that information with your doctor, because your doctor might say, oh, yeah, it does. We did an MRI, and you don't have that type of herniation, or gosh, we were wrong about what we thought you had. If that's bothering you, then this other stuff is, or whatever. It's just good information to have. But those are the two main exercises. Decompress and do some type of cobra stretch, because you're bending yourself in such a way that instead of herniating the disc out, you're actually pushing it back. What probably caused the problem in the first place was going forward. You're going back. You've decompressed first, now you're going back. Very effective, and you're stretching out your hip flexors. If you've made it to this point, your back still bothers you, but things are going pretty well. And you can kind of go into the final phase, which is to start to strengthen up your core muscles. We actually don't have you do this in the beginning because you're in so much pain that strengthening your core muscles, all that does is it strengthens them, and that's great, but it tightens down everything here and it actually creates more problems. So first we started with, not sleeping too much, not walking too much, not sitting too much, not standing too much, doing little bits of everything. Then we finally got into kind of a walking routine, and that was going pretty well. Then we decompressed, did cobra stretches, that's going pretty well. Now we're ready to strengthen. That doesn't mean we stop walking, by the way, stop resting, stop de-stressing, stop doing cobra stretches. That means we can actually just start strengthening these areas up. So let's show you a couple of really key exercises to do there. And those are cat stretches. Cat stretches are really pelvic tilt stretches. I enjoyed showing me doing exercises last time so much that I'm going to do it again because I think it's helpful to actually see the action and not just the picture. There we go. So it looks like it's about somebody flexing their back, and they are, but it's really about them tilting their pelvis. I know this looks slightly inappropriate, but that's when you know you're doing it right. I am trying to tilt my pelvis. That's what causes my back to move. And in doing so, I'm working my back muscles and my abdominal muscles, tilting my pelvis. And it should feel like a stretch both ways. But the person in the picture, they're doing it correctly, but you have to realize all that back movement is because they're moving their hips. It's their hips that are rocking. Yeah? If that makes sense. So it's my hips that are actually doing the movement. My back's going along for the ride. Cool. That's great because you're starting to strengthen your pelvis so that it stays as a stable ground for your back. You can add planking on top of that if that goes well. Planking's a great abdominal exercise. It's exactly what this person is doing here. You are trying to hold yourself up in a push-up essentially. And what it's doing is it's strengthening 4 out of 5 of your abdominal muscles. Actually, and all your hip flexors at the same time. So it's a really good core strength exercise, perfect to do. And last, and I do say last because this one's actually very challenging for people that have back injuries, but last, they call it bird dog in this picture. It's just arm and leg extensions, but it's opposite arm and leg extensions. And so when you're doing them, I'm sticking out my left leg and my right arm. My left arm and my right leg. And what this does is cause my whole back to have to strengthen up all along what we call my back fascial line. Doesn't matter what it's called. The fact is we're strengthening that up. And that would be the last thing to add. So each of these are kind of a progressive thing that you do as you heal. And then essentially I really would recommend you don't stop doing these things, right? Because you kind of end up getting back into that situation. I will say in closing, for ask if you have any questions, I've had back problems for a long time, and the one blessing that they've been to me, and I really do mean a blessing, they've been a horrible curse too, but the blessing that they've been is that anytime I'm not kind of taking care of myself, that's the first thing that kind of goes, right? If I work too much, if I'm like, oh, I can just do one more for so-and-so, whatever, that's what goes. And I think that is actually kind of a blessing, that it reminds me that nothing is more important than my health. And I think that's the lesson in there. Any questions? By the way, I can send you this slide presentation so that if you're like, I want pictures of the exercises and all that kind of stuff, I'm happy just to send it to you and send me an email and I will zip it right over to you. You can have the whole thing. I've even recorded this presentation. I don't know why you want to listen to me twice, but you could. And I can send that to you too. So any questions, thoughts, comments? Anything? No?
I thought that was excellent, Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the best thought.